In the summer of 2018, a man named S.J. Brooks was trail running alone in the foothills west of Fort Collins, Colorado, when a juvenile mountain lion dropped from above and fastened its jaws around his head. What followed has been described in the official account from Colorado Parks and Wildlife as a predatory attack, meaning the lion was not startled, not defending cubs, not injured. It had selected a target and moved on it with deliberate intent. Brooks survived by fighting back with his hands, choking the animal until it released him, then running toward a group of other trail runners. The lion pursued him. He was found by those runners with significant lacerations to his face and scalp. A second runner in the group, who had fallen behind on the trail, was found dead. The lion had returned to him after releasing Brooks and completed the attack it had apparently begun with the first. The dead man's name was Mark Malin. He was 31 years old. He was the first person killed by a mountain lion in Colorado in the documented history of the state. The incident received national coverage for approximately 4 days. Wildlife managers issued the standard statements about the extreme rarity of mountain lion attacks and the importance of keeping the event in statistical context. Colorado Parks and Wildlife emphasized that hundreds of thousands of people recreate in mountain lion habitat every year without incident. All of that is true. The attack was statistically rare on the day it happened. What the coverage did not address, because it did not fit the narrative of extreme rarity that wildlife agencies have understandably favored, is the direction of the trend line. Mountain lion attacks on humans in North America are not holding steady. They have been increasing, not dramatically, not in a way that makes a solo trail run more dangerous than driving to the trailhead, but the increase is real, it is documented, and it is happening against a backdrop of ecological and demographic changes that the standard explanation of statistical noise cannot fully account for. The story of why mountain lions almost never attack humans is a genuinely important story. The story of why that calculus is quietly shifting is the one that needs to be told alongside it. The baseline fact deserves to be stated clearly because it is genuinely remarkable and because it is the foundation on which everything else rests. In the entire recorded history of North America, mountain lions have killed approximately 27 people. That number includes attacks from Canada to Mexico, across a time span that begins with the earliest colonial records in the 1600s and extends to the present. 27 confirmed human fatalities in roughly 4 centuries, across a continent where the species has been present in substantial numbers throughout. In any given year, the statistical probability that a specific individual recreating in mountain lion habitat will be killed by one is so small that expressing it as a fraction requires more decimal places than are meaningful to human intuition. You are orders of magnitude more likely to be killed by a domestic dog, struck by lightning, or drowned in a bathtub than to be fatally attacked by a mountain lion. The rarity is not a public relations construct. It is a genuine biological fact that requires an explanation, because mountain lions are large, powerful, highly capable predators that share habitat with millions of humans, and yet choose, with extraordinary consistency, not to attack them. Understanding why requires understanding something about how mountain lions perceive and categorize the world. Mountain lions are ambush predators that have evolved over millions of years to hunt prey species with specific characteristics. Their prey recognition system, built from evolutionary history and refined by individual learning, identifies potential prey through a combination of size, movement pattern, behavioral cues, and smell. Deer, elk, bighorn sheep, pronghorn, and the other ungulate species that constitute the core of the mountain lion's diet across most of its range share a suite of characteristics that a mountain lion has been selected over deep evolutionary time to recognize and respond to. They move in specific ways. They produce specific sounds. They smell in specific ways. They are the right size. They behave in ways that trigger the predatory sequence in the mountain lion's nervous system. Humans share some of these characteristics superficially, but differ from them in ways that are biologically significant to a mountain lion that has grown up in wild conditions, learning to hunt wild prey. The most important of these differences is behavioral. Wild ungulates, when they detect a mountain lion, exhibit the fight or flight response with immediate and dramatic physical expression. They bolt, or they form defensive groups, or in the case of some species like elk cows with calves, they may charge. What they do not do is stand upright, look directly at the predator, shout at it, and wave their arms. Humans do these things instinctively, and they are, it turns out, deeply counterproductive from the prey animal's perspective, but deeply effective from the perspective of an animal trying not to be attacked. Mountain lions, like virtually all apex predators, operate on a cost-benefit calculation that is not conscious, but is nonetheless real. An attack on a prey animal is not cost-free. Mountain lions are injured in hunts. They break ribs against the hooves of deer. They sustain lacerations from antlers. They occasionally die from kicks or gores. The calculus of predation is not simply about whether the predator can kill the prey. It is about whether the expected caloric return from a successful kill is worth the expected injury risk of the attempt. When a human being turns to face a mountain lion, stands tall, makes direct eye contact, shouts, and throws things, it is behaving in a way that no mountain lion has evolved to process as prey behavior. It is triggering an avoidance response rather than a predatory one. The mountain lion retreats not because it cannot kill a human. It retreats because the behavioral signals it is receiving do not match the pattern that initiates the predatory sequence, and because the risk calculation shifts dramatically when the potential prey is acting like nothing the mountain lion has a framework for. This is why Wildlife Agency guidance on mountain lion encounters has been consistent for decades, and why it works. Make yourself large. Make noise. Do not run. Maintain eye contact. Fight back if attacked. The guidance is not derived from a theory about mountain lion psychology. It is derived from the documented outcomes of thousands of human mountain lion encounters, in which the humans who behaved this way were not attacked, and the humans who behaved differently sometimes were. The behavioral protocol exploits the genuine biological reality that mountain lions are not generalist predators that attack anything they can kill. They are specialists that attack prey whose behavioral signature matches a template built by evolution and refined by experience. Humans who behave like large, assertive, unpredictable animals that are not fleeing do not match that template. Humans who behave like small, fleeing, panicked animals sometimes do. The running behavior is the most important and least instinctively appreciated element of this picture. Mountain lions have an extremely powerful predatory response to fleeing targets. This is not unusual among predators. The chase response, triggered by the sight of a fleeing animal, is nearly universal among large carnivores and represents the neurological expression of an evolutionarily old association between flight and vulnerability. When a deer runs, it is telling the mountain lion that it has been detected and that the opportunity window is closing. This triggers pursuit. When a human runs, it triggers the same response, not because the mountain lion has decided the human is prey, but because the neurological machinery that drives pursuit does not carefully distinguish between a fleeing deer and a fleeing human in the first fractions of a second of activation. This is why trail runners are statistically overrepresented in mountain lion encounter incidents relative to hikers moving at a walking pace. The running human is activating the predatory response in an animal that might otherwise have watched them pass with mild curiosity. The encounters that end badly share a cluster of features that, when examined together, reveal something important about the conditions under which mountain lions override their default avoidance of humans. They occur almost exclusively in specific contexts. The victim is frequently alone. They are often moving fast. They are sometimes small. Specifically, they are often children. The encounter frequently occurs in low-light conditions, at dawn or dusk. The lion involved is often identified afterwards as a juvenile, a subadult, or an animal that shows signs of nutritional stress. These are not randomly distributed across all mountain lion encounters. They cluster with the kind of consistency that points to a set of underlying mechanisms rather than random variation around a fixed, low probability. Each of these features represents a condition that modifies the basic cost-benefit calculation of predation in a direction that makes a human seem more like prey than the default situation. Lone individuals present a fundamentally different risk profile than groups. Multiple humans moving together are louder, more unpredictable, and more visually confusing to a predator assessing a potential attack opportunity. They present multiple points of possible retaliation. The tracking record of mountain lion encounters shows a strong and consistent association between solitary humans and predatory behavior, and a correspondingly strong association between groups of humans and non-predatory encounters that end with the lion withdrawing. This is not speculation. It is a pattern extracted from the documented record of hundreds of encounters over decades. The protective effect of group size appears to kick in at very small numbers. 2 or 3 people moving together present a dramatically different risk profile than one. Children are the most serious concern in the documented attack record, for reasons that are both obvious and sobering. Of the 27 confirmed mountain lion fatalities in North American recorded history, a disproportionate number involve children. The size differential is significant. A child between the ages of 3 and 10 is, from the perspective of a mountain lion's prey recognition system, closer in size to the deer and sheep that constitute its natural diet than an adult human is. The behavioral signals are also different. Children move less predictably, make higher-pitched sounds, and are less likely to execute the confrontational behavioral response that deters attack. They are less capable of fighting back effectively if an attack begins. In areas where mountain lions have become habituated to human presence, the incidents involving children represent the sharpest and most disturbing departure from the baseline of rarity. A mountain lion that has lost its wariness of humans in a suburban or peri-urban context, where it has spent months moving through developed areas without negative consequence, begins to recalibrate its assessment of the risk that humans represent. Children, in that recalibrated assessment, may begin to register in a different category than they would for a wild conditioned animal that has never been in close proximity to humans at all. This brings the discussion to the trend. The trend is the part that wildlife agencies have been careful about communicating publicly, for reasons that are understandable, but that produce a specific kind of distortion in the public understanding of the risk landscape. The number of confirmed mountain lion attacks on humans in North America has increased since the 1970s. The increase is not exponential. It is not producing a wave of fatalities that demands emergency policy responses. But it is real, it is sustained, and it has continued through periods when the mountain lion's overall range and population were growing, which means it cannot be attributed simply to more lions in more places, producing more random encounters. Something about the nature of the encounters is changing, not just their frequency. Mountain lion populations across the western United States and southwestern Canada have grown significantly since the 1970s, when most states and provinces transitioned from bounty systems that incentivized killing to regulated sport hunting programs that managed the species as a game animal. Some states, most notably California, went further and eliminated sport hunting entirely in 1990. The California decision was made by voter initiative and reflected a public sentiment about wildlife protection that was entirely sincere and produced the conservation outcome it intended. The mountain lion population in California grew substantially following the hunting ban. It is now estimated at between 4,000 and 6,000 animals. The state hosts the largest mountain lion population of any jurisdiction in the lower 48 states. It also hosts the most documented mountain lion attacks on humans of any state in the United States over the same period. The correlation between the two facts is not straightforward causation. More lions, in more habitat that overlaps with more human development, produces more encounters. More encounters produces more opportunities for the subset of encounters that turn into attacks. The increase in absolute attack numbers is partly a function of population and range expansion meeting an expanding human footprint in mountain lion habitat. But not entirely. California wildlife researchers studying mountain lion behavior in the areas of highest human-wildlife overlap have documented something that represents a genuine departure from the historical behavioral baseline. In regions of the state where human development has encroached deeply into mountain lion habitat, specifically in the coastal ranges, the Santa Ana Mountains, and the Santa Cruz Mountains, lions have been documented moving through developed areas with a frequency and a comfort level that their wild-conditioned counterparts in less developed terrain do not exhibit. GPS collar data from mountain lions in the Santa Ana Mountains, collected as part of the National Park Service's ongoing predator study in the region, shows individuals crossing 6-lane freeways, moving through golf courses and horse ranches, resting in drainage corridors between residential developments, and conducting hunts in areas where residential lighting is visible from the kill site. These are not occasional intrusions driven by hunger or navigational error. They are routine movements by animals that have learned, through direct experience, that human-dominated terrain is traversable and that humans themselves do not represent a threat. The behavioral term for what is happening is habituation, and it is one of the most consequential and least publicly discussed ecological processes occurring at the interface between mountain lion populations and human communities in the American West. Habituation is the process by which an animal's response to a stimulus decreases through repeated exposure without negative consequence. A mountain lion that has been moving through a suburban canyon system for 2 years without ever being chased, shot at, or otherwise disturbed by a human has been undergoing a continuous habituation process. Its wariness of humans has been declining with each uneventful exposure. The behavioral buffer that kept it out of close contact with human beings has been eroding. It has not decided that humans are prey, but it has progressively recalibrated the radius at which it treats human presence as a signal to withdraw. That radius shrinks. The animal gets closer to humans with less behavioral disruption, and as the radius shrinks, the probability of encounters at close range, the encounters where the risk of a predatory response is highest, increases. The combination of habituation and nutritional stress is the most dangerous configuration documented in the attack record. Nutritional stress occurs when a lion's prey availability declines below the level needed to meet its caloric requirements. This happens when prey populations decline due to drought, disease, or other factors. It happens when a young dispersing male has not yet established a territory and is competing with residents for access to hunting grounds. It happens in areas where human activity has reduced prey abundance or altered prey movement patterns in ways that make hunting less productive. A nutritionally stressed mountain lion that has also become habituated to human presence has had 2 of its fundamental behavioral constraints on attacking humans significantly weakened simultaneously. Its wariness of humans has been reduced by habituation. Its selectivity about prey has been reduced by hunger. The attack record shows, with striking consistency, that the most dangerous individual lions in the documented history of attacks are those that combine these 2 conditions. They are not randomly distributed across the population. They are animals that have arrived at a specific behavioral and physiological state through a process that is increasingly common in the areas of the American West where human development and mountain lion habitat overlap most extensively. The situation in suburban Southern California represents the most intensively studied version of this dynamic, and the one whose implications extend most directly to the future of human mountain lion coexistence across North America. The mountain lions of the Santa Ana Mountains, a range that runs between the San Diego and Los Angeles metropolitan areas and is bordered on all sides by dense urban and suburban development, are among the most monitored wild predators in the world. The National Park Service study that has been tracking individuals in this population since the mid-2000s has produced a detailed behavioral and demographic record that reveals, in the aggregate, what happens to a mountain lion population when it is effectively marooned in an island of habitat surrounded by a sea of human development. The lions cannot disperse. The freeways that bound their range are lethal barriers that kill a significant proportion of those who attempt to cross. They are breeding in a closed population with growing inbreeding coefficients. Their prey base, the Colombian black-tailed deer of the coastal ranges, is subject to the same habitat pressures as the lions. The carrying capacity of the range for mountain lions is not large. The population is not large. But the intensity of overlap between that population and the human communities that surround and penetrate the range is extraordinary and produces a laboratory-scale version of the human-mountain lion interface problem that is playing out at larger scales across the West. What the Santa Ana data shows is that the lions have become extraordinarily competent at navigating human-dominated terrain. They cross roads, move through culverts, rest in areas with ambient human noise and light. They take domestic prey, primarily horses, dogs, and other livestock, at rates that reflect both their adaptability and their nutritional flexibility. They have been documented investigating residential properties in multiple incidents that did not result in attacks, but demonstrated comfort with close human proximity that wild-conditioned animals in more remote habitats do not exhibit. The study population has not produced a large number of human attacks. The study population is also not large. As the region's mountain lion population grows, if the wildlife corridor infrastructure that advocates have been pushing for decades is not built to allow population dispersal, and if the habituation process continues at its current rate in the areas of deepest human-wildlife overlap, the behavioral conditions for increased attack risk are being assembled with a methodical consistency that independent researchers find concerning and that official communications have been slow to address directly. The prey-switching behavior that accompanies habituation is worth examining specifically because it represents the mechanism through which habituation translates into attack risk in a way that is not always intuitive. Mountain lions are flexible predators that adjust their prey selection based on availability and opportunity. In their natural range, this flexibility expresses itself in shifts between ungulate species, between size classes within species, and occasionally toward non-ungulate prey like porcupines, raccoons, and beaver during periods of low deer availability. In human-adjacent terrain, this flexibility expresses itself in a different direction. Domestic livestock, specifically horses, goats, sheep, and llamas, are taken at elevated rates in areas where lions have habituated to human-dominated landscapes. Domestic dogs, particularly large breeds used for hiking, are represented in incident reports at rates that reflect both their prevalence in the terrain and their behavioral signature as potential prey for a habituated lion. The movement from domestic livestock to domestic dogs represents a step along a gradient towards smaller, more human-proximate prey, and the documented cases in which that progression has continued further are among the most instructive in the attack record. The progression is not inevitable. It is not even common. The vast majority of mountain lions that habituate to some degree of human presence never attack a human being. The behavioral governor that suppresses predatory responses toward humans is robust and survives a substantial amount of habituation, without failing. But it is not absolute, and the conditions under which it fails are becoming more common, not less, as the human footprint in mountain lion habitat expands, as prey availability fluctuates, and as the dispersal barriers that historically shuffled mountain lion populations across large landscapes become more restrictive. The children and pets dimension of this picture deserves a sustained and careful treatment, because it is the dimension most likely to shape public attitudes toward mountain lion conservation in ways that matter to the species' long-term future. Between 2010 and 2023, the documented incidence of mountain lions attacking or stalking children and domestic dogs in the United States increased at a rate that outpaces the growth of the mountain lion population itself. This is the signal in the trend that cannot be explained by simply more lions encountering more humans. It reflects something about the behavioral profile of the encounters, specifically an increase in close-range, daylight encounters in peri-urban areas involving animals that show reduced wariness, with victims who show the size and behavioral characteristics that most closely match prey templates in a habituated animal's recalibrated assessment. The incidents are still rare in absolute terms. They are not rare enough to be treated as statistical noise in the trend data. Wildlife managers in California, Colorado, Washington, and British Columbia, the jurisdictions with the most intensive human mountain lion overlap and the most detailed incident records, have been quietly shifting their communications about attack risk in ways that reflect an awareness of the trend, without explicitly acknowledging its direction. The boilerplate language about extreme rarity remains, but it is increasingly accompanied by specific behavioral guidance directed at parents of young children, dog walkers, and trail runners that implies a risk profile somewhat more calibrated to current conditions than the historical baseline. The guidance about never letting children play outside unattended in areas adjacent to mountain lion habitat is appearing in official communications from jurisdictions where it was not standard 5 years ago. The recommendations about keeping dogs on leash in mountain lion territory have become more specific and more emphatic. The language around dawn and dusk recreation in high-density mountain lion areas has become more direct. These are not alarm signals, they are adjustments. The adjustments tell you something about what wildlife managers are seeing in their incident data that is not yet being clearly communicated to the public. The management response available to wildlife agencies when individual mountain lions demonstrate habituation or predatory behavior toward humans is lethal removal. An animal that has stalked a child, entered a residential area in daylight, or demonstrated the behavioral profile associated with elevated attack risk is almost always killed by wildlife managers. The removal is operationally swift and ecologically insignificant at the population level. What is less clear is whether removal of problem individuals is sufficient as a long-term management strategy when the conditions producing the behavioral profile are structural rather than individual. If the habitat fragmentation, prey fluctuation, and human-wildlife interface dynamics that produce habituated, nutritionally stressed lions are not addressed at the landscape scale, the removal of individual animals addresses the symptom without touching the cause. The next young male pushed into the same peri-urban habitat by the same population pressure and the same dispersal barriers will face the same conditions and may develop the same behavioral profile. Management by removal has a logic and an immediate human safety justification that is not in question. Whether it is sufficient as the only response to a systemic problem is the question that is not being asked loudly enough in official forums. The trail running community represents a specific population that the incident data has been highlighting for over a decade, and the community's response to that data has been an interesting case study in how people process probabilistic risk information about activities they are deeply committed to. Trail running has grown dramatically as a recreation category over the past 15 years. Trail race events that drew hundreds of participants in 2005 now draw thousands. The total number of human hours spent running on trails in mountain lion habitat in the American West has increased by orders of magnitude. The attack incidents involving trail runners have increased in proportion. The community's response has generally been to emphasize the rarity of attacks relative to the total participation base, which is statistically accurate, and to resist behavioral guidance that would substantially alter how the sport is practiced, which is understandable. Running with a partner, carrying a deterrent, avoiding dawn and dusk on known mountain lion corridors. All of these recommendations impose real costs on an activity whose appeal is partly the solitude and the freedom of movement it provides. The tension between accurate risk communication and the behavioral changes that would reduce even a small risk is not unique to trail running or to mountain lion encounters. It is a feature of human risk perception generally. People are better at accepting unchangeable risks than at modifying valued behaviors in response to probabilistic threats. The result in this specific context is a recreation community moving through mountain lion habitat in ways that systematically elevate encounter risk without a proportionate increase in awareness of what that elevation means. What the future of human-mountain lion coexistence looks like depends enormously on decisions that are being made right now, in planning offices and wildlife management departments and highway engineering bureaus, about the infrastructure of the landscape. Wildlife crossing structures across major freeways, which would allow mountain lion populations to move across currently impassable barriers and disperse the demographic pressure that accumulates in isolated populations, are being built in some places and not others. The famous Wallace-Annenberg wildlife crossing over the 101 freeway in the Santa Monica Mountains, completed in late 2023 after years of advocacy and fundraising, represents one end of the spectrum of what is possible. The majority of the major transportation barriers in mountain lion habitat in the West remain uncrossed. The demographic pressure that isolated populations produce, the nutritional stress, the inbreeding depression, the competitive intensity that pushes young males into human-dominated terrain, is a function of that infrastructure deficit as much as it is of mountain lion biology or human behavior. The 27 people killed by mountain lions in 4 centuries of recorded North American history are not a warning about mountain lions as a class of threat to human safety. They are not evidence that the species is dangerous in the sense that matters for daily life. The rarity is real and should be understood and respected, rather than weaponized against the mountain lion's conservation interests by people who would prefer the species not exist. But the trend within that rarity, the increasing frequency of close encounters, the changing behavioral profile of the lions involved, the structural conditions producing habituated and nutritionally stressed individuals in human-adjacent terrain, is also real. It deserves honest attention, rather than reassurance, that serves the communication preferences of wildlife agencies and the comfort preferences of a recreation community that would rather not modify its behavior. The mountain lion is not becoming a human predator, but it is, in specific places, under specific conditions, becoming something that it was not before, something more comfortable with human proximity, something recalibrating its assessment of what humans represent. Not a predator of humans, not yet, not usually, but an animal whose relationship to the human landscape is changing in ways that the historical baseline of extreme rarity does not fully capture anymore, and the gap between what that baseline tells us and what the current conditions are producing is where the conversation needs to happen, honestly and clearly and without the reassuring language that makes everyone feel better and no one better prepared.